We're standing in the middle of a field in Vancouver, Washington, just north of Portland. It's a hot day, but there's a breeze. Overhead, we can hear the sounds of 3 different kinds of flying objects. The first, and perhaps what you'd most expect to hear in a field, are the songbirds, zipping around, tweeting at each other. The second is the sonic boom-like low grumble of jet airliners. We're not far from the Portland International Airport, and in the sky above are Boeing 747s, the seatbacks and tray tables kind of plane, approaching their destination. Between the massive airliners holding hundreds of passengers and the birds, analog aircraft if you will, are a third sound. Smaller planes, 1 or 2 seaters, the type of plane that these days you don't just get in because you need to get somewhere. You get in because you truly want to fly. This is the Pearson Airfield at Fort Vancouver, which a sign near the field tells us is one of the oldest continuously operating airports in the United States. Today, aviators use the airfield to take off for a scenic spin through the skies over the Columbia River. Future aviators can take lessons here too. And nearby is the Pearson Air Museum, sharing the area's rich aviation history with visitors 5 days a week. Some of you may have learned the broad strokes of American aviation history in school. The Wright brothers flew the first airplane.
This film, made in 1903, recalls the first flight of this primitive biplane making aviation history.
Charles Lindbergh made the first solo transatlantic flight, and the first woman to fly across the Atlantic alone was Amelia Earhart. Here she is describing her landing.
I cruised inland until I found a suitable pasture. I landed there after frightening all the cows in the neighborhood and rolled up to the farmer's front door. I think he was surprised to find an airplane in his front yard.
But Amelia Earhart wasn't the only woman taking to the skies. In fact, in the 1930s, the growing ranks of female pilots inspired to take flight included some of the first Chinese American women ever to earn pilot's licenses in the United States. And they came from the same tight-knit Chinese community right across the river in Portland, Oregon. From the Gert Boyle studio, I'm Jen Chavez, and this is The Evergreen, a podcast from OPB about the place you call home. Today, we learn the stories of 2 trailblazing Chinese American pilots who called this place home too. Hazel Ying Lee, the first Chinese American woman to fly for the U.S. military.
One of the things that has always struck me in every photo of Hazel that I ever come across is just this boldness in her eyes. She just wanted to do something that no other Chinese American girl had done before.
And Leah Hing, one of the first Chinese American women to earn a pilot's license, whose plane is on display at the Pearson Air Museum.
Leah had the freedom to soar, essentially, in her plane. She had the freedom to pursue anything she wanted to do.
How these young women, the daughters of immigrants, looked upwards and saw themselves up there. How their curiosity and desire to explore cemented their roles in the history of a country which sought to exclude them. And how they're remembered today by their loved ones, by Portlanders, by Americans, at a time when so much history is intentionally being forgotten. Part 1. Hazel. Hazel Ying Lee was born on August 24th, 1912 in Portland, the daughter of Chinese immigrants. She and her family lived in a small walk-up apartment on 4th Street in Chinatown. Hazel grew up as Portland's Chinatown was going through a lot of change. For one, a building boom was going on in Portland, which was great for the city's business interests and grew its population. But
that boom essentially displaces Chinese Portlanders from the old Chinatown south of Burnside toward New Chinatown, which is north of Burnside.
Dr. Jennifer Fang is an independent historian and the director of exhibitions at the Wing Luke Museum in Seattle. She's studied and written about the early Chinese diaspora in Oregon. She said as Portland's Chinese population faced displacement, it was also dramatically shrinking.
I think maybe in the late 1800s, Portland's Chinese population was nearly 10% of the total population. By 1920, it's like 0.05%.
But at the same time, the gender ratio of Chinatown residents was becoming more equal, which meant more families.
Hazel's an example of this, right? Like she's born to a merchant class family, and she's one of the few rare children in Chinatown who grow up in Chinatown.
Hazel had 8 siblings. Her parents owned a Chinese restaurant. She was a scrappy, competitive kid, her sister Frances Tong remembered.
She makes friends with all the kids in school. She's a good handball player. I remember that very well because nobody beat her.
She's always in some kind of trouble all the time.
And that's Hazel's best friend growing up, Elsie Chang. Elsie and Frances both recorded oral histories about Hazel with the Museum of Chinese in America in New York. Hazel ran races, played sports, learned to drive, and in general enjoyed breaking the mold. Her mom would say she's not afraid of the wind. She's not afraid of the water. When she was a teenager, Hazel went with a friend to an air show, kind of like this one. This is the annual Air Show of the Cascades, held at the historic Madras Airport last year. In Hazel's day, going to an air show like this would have been a pretty common activity for Portlanders. Oregon was an early hub of American aviation. It was the first state in the country to develop a state board of aeronautics in 1921, and aviation was just super popular here. The Oregonian even had an aviation editor, and there were multiple airports within miles of downtown. At that air show, Hazel took her very first ride in an airplane, and it changed her life. From then on, Hazel knew she had to fly. To save money for flying lessons, Hazel worked as an elevator operator at Lieb's department store downtown.
We just go there when she's there, and then we ride the elevator up and down when she was running it.
At the time, it was one of the only jobs available to Chinese American women.
Either you would be a stock girl or an elevator operator, or you might work in the theater's restroom in your costume. It was very difficult for an Asian person to find a job.
Hazel and her friends grew up under the Chinese Exclusion Act, a law first implemented in 1882 and then made permanent in 1902. The act banned new immigration of Chinese laborers into the U.S., but it also affected Chinese American immigrants who were already here, historian Jennifer Fang said.
It prevented Chinese people who are already in the United States from becoming naturalized citizens. I mean, I think the act essentially creates this political and economic underclass. But then you have their American-born children who are able to, they have more freedoms and more privileges than their parents.
The Exclusion Act was a reflection of widespread anti-Chinese racism at the time. And even though Hazel had birthright citizenship, it must have affected her.
Hazel growing up in that atmosphere, I think would often, even though she was a child, she obviously realized that there were these invisible walls around her. And I can't imagine that she did not sort of feel these barriers in her day-to-day life.
Julie Leah is the author of a children's book about Hazel's story, The Fearless Flights of Hazel Ying Lee. Even in the face of discrimination, nothing could stop Hazel. She saved up enough money, and by the time she was 20, she graduated from elevator operator to certified pilot. She earned her pilot's license in less than a year, learning to fly at Portland's Swan Island Airport. Leah said she had singular determination.
One of the things that has always struck me in every photo of Hazel that I ever come across is just this boldness in her eyes. Like she just wanted to do something that no other Chinese American girl had done before.
But Hazel earned her wings just as the world was descending into violence.
Japan's answer to the economic blizzard of the Depression was war. First, an invasion of Manchuria, and then China.
In 1931, Japan invaded China. This was the beginning of a long conflict that turned into one of the most brutal wars in history and left an estimated 20 million people dead. The war eventually bled into the larger global conflict that became World War II. It would be another 10 years before the U.S. got involved, but Hazel wanted to help, and she wasn't the only one.
One of the byproducts of exclusion is that it encourages people to maintain ties to China and to keep that connection to China as a core element of their identity and their sense of self and their sense of community.
Hazel's piloting skills led her to join what became known as the Portland Group. They were a class of Chinese American pilots, specially selected by Portland's Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association to train in military combat maneuvers under veteran Pacific Northwest pilot Al Greenwood. Their ultimate goal was to travel to China and volunteer to join the Chinese Air Force. In those days, aviation was becoming culturally important to Chinese Americans as a path towards the future. This was encouraged by prominent Chinese political leaders like Sun Yat-sen, who founded the Republic of China. He coined the phrase, aviation to save the nation. Plus, this was before aviation became a legitimate profession, so rules and stereotypes around who could or couldn't be a pilot weren't really written yet, creating space for young female pilots like Hazel. So she and her classmates left the U.S. and traveled to China. But despite the need for pilots there,
they wouldn't let her fly, of course.
No women allowed.
She was very disappointed.
Hazel cannot understand why all her friends get a chance to fly.
Hazel's mom, her sister Frances, and best friend Elsie all eventually joined Hazel in Guangzhou, formerly known as Canton. They were in the city when...
Once again, invading bombers have struck terror into the hearts of Chinese civilians. Men, women, and children fled before the hail of death that came unheralded from the skies over their once peaceful city.
Where were we going to hide from the bomb? They would just drop them like mad. And she was looking for hiding places for all of us.
In the chaos, they escaped to Hong Kong. Hazel felt powerless.
Being in Hong Kong as a refugee, there was nothing that she could do. So she came back to America.
Back in New York, Hazel took a desk job and tried to find a different way to help. Then...
America has been attacked without warning. That's the dramatic, the almost fantastic news that Presidential Secretary Early tells the press.
After the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, the U.S. was fighting in Europe and the Pacific, and there was a shortage of pilots. So a woman named Jacqueline Cochran proposed an idea for a new pilot training program, one that would enlist women and train them to fly for the U.S. military. These pilots eventually became known as the WASP, Women Air Force Service Pilots. The symbol of the WASP featured the shield of the Greek goddess Athena, flanked by 2 silver wings. They trained at Avenger Field in Sweetwater, Texas.
This is Texas, cradle of our Army's Air Force. This is an AAF field, too. But over headquarters rides a strange little girl gremlin called Fiffinella. And out of those buses are stepping girls. Girls who give a new angle to an Air Force story. They're WASPs, Women's Air Force Service Pilots.
When the WASP program opened up and she read about it, that was literally the first thing that she did was enlist.
She got in. And with that, Hazel became the first ever Chinese American woman to fly for the U.S. military. WASP served on bases across the country and worked long hours, 7 days a week. They were often the first to fly planes right off the assembly line, and they transported old, war-weary planes to stations where they could be repaired. They tested aircraft, ferried supplies, and trained other pilots. And Hazel was the best of the best. One of around 100 women out of more than 1,000 who qualified to fly the most high-powered fighters. Hazel was a natural leader in the WASP and well-loved by her comrades. She was well known for her kindness, wit, humor, skill, and tenacity.
She would sort of use her lipstick and, write out Chinese nicknames on everyone's plane's tail. And she would always know exactly where were the Chinese restaurants of the places that she would land and call up and order things off menu. And so you sort of get this wonderful, vibrant portrait of a woman ahead of her time and who sort of used her ethnicity as a point of pride, even though she faced so many barriers because of that identity.
Take, for instance, the first time she had a forced landing. Her engine failed, and she landed in a field in Kansas. The farmer whose land it was mistook her for a Japanese pilot and chased her around her plane with a pitchfork until she was able to convince him otherwise. Despite the alarming encounter, she had landed safely and was able to call for help. But later, Hazel was beginning her descent to an airfield in Great Falls, Montana, when she got an order over the radio to pull up. Another plane above her was coming in for a landing at the same time. The two planes were too close for safety. Hazel pulled up. The pilot above her received the same order, but his radio was broken and he never got the message. The two planes collided in the air. Hazel was pulled from the burning wreck. She survived the initial crash and was taken to a nearby military hospital. But her injuries were just too severe. On November 25, 1944, Hazel became the 38th WASP to die in service. She was 32 years old. 3 days later, Hazel's family received another telegram. Hazel's younger brother, Victor, a soldier in the U.S. Army, had died in combat in Europe.
Within 2 days of each other in France, in the tank.
And I couldn't believe it. It was such a good heart.
Less than a month after Hazel's death, the WASP were disbanded. But even in death, WASP weren't recognized like other members of the Air Force. The military had considered these women civilian employees, even though they wore the same uniforms, went through the same training, and were expected to follow orders just like an enlisted soldier. When Hazel died, the military would not even pay to transport her body home, and she was not honored with a military funeral. So Hazel's family brought her back to Portland. They picked out a spot for her to be buried on a hill overlooking the Willamette River, here at the Riverview Cemetery.
Florence had picked out the spot, and she applied for it, and they said they couldn't sell it to her because we were Asians. And the cemetery in that area was not allotted for the Chinese. They said no. Florence is a very mild person, but this one time, she really gave it to them. She says, they had died in the war for America, for the United States, and they are entitled to it. And should it not be, she would go to the War Department. They realized it, so they aren't here. Sorry.
Hazel was buried next to her brother, the shields of Athena engraved on her tombstone. It took more than 3 decades, but in 1977, President Carter finally recognized the WASP and granted them veteran status and benefits. And in 2010, over half a century later, all WASP received the Congressional Gold Medal for their service, record, and revolutionary reform in the armed forces. WASP Deanie Parrish received a medal on stage on their behalf.
I believe I speak for every WASP when I say that it was both a privilege and an honor to serve our country during some of the darkest days of World War II.
But today, the WASP face erasure once again. Amid the Trump administration's federal purge and ban on diversity, equity, and inclusion, information about the WASP was scrubbed from the U.S. Army's website. Using the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine, I can see a detailed page about WASP history on the site as of October 2024. But now the URL redirects to the Army homepage. When we checked in March, a banner on the homepage read, quote, "Archived historical content from culturally focused Army websites is under review for compliance with executive and OSD policy. Content will be reposted after the review," end quote. But now, the banner's gone, and the WASP history still isn't there. Luckily, they're not the only ones keeping track of U.S. aviation history. Coming up after a break, we head to the Pearson Air Museum in Vancouver to learn the story of another fearless flyer from Portland, Chinese American pilot Leah Hing. Thanks for listening to The Evergreen, a podcast from OPB about the place you call home. If you like what you hear, subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app, and we'll brighten your Monday morning a little bit with something new and exciting to listen to each week. You can also follow OPB on Instagram at OPB Photo, or follow me directly at Jen Chavez OPB. That's Jen with 2 N's, and I'll keep you posted on what Team Evergreen is up to. And remember, this episode about Chinese American aviators from Portland and all the great OPB reporting and storytelling you hear on this show is made possible by the support of many thousands of OPB members. That's what keeps us going, even after Congress cut federal funding for public media. Yep, that's us. And the public is you. That means you can help us keep this service strong for your family, your neighbors, and everyone who counts on it, even when the going gets tough. If you have the means, please support our journalism by becoming an OPB sustaining member today at opb.org/pod. Thank you so much for your support. And now, back to the show. Part 2. Leah. The Pearson Air Museum at the Fort Vancouver National Historic Site is dedicated to the storied aviation history of Pearson Airfield. The museum is in an old airplane hangar, and it's full of very cool historic biplanes. A DH-4 Liberty, the only American-produced plane flown by U.S. troops in World War I. A JN-4 Jenny, used to train thousands of U.S. service members in the teens and 20s. A replica of a Curtiss Pusher, the first mass-produced airplane. There's even an airplane hanging from the ceiling with a couple mannequin guys in it, decked out in flight gear. And gleaming on the museum floor, a 1931 Fleet Model 7, flown from right here at Pearson Field. It was the first plane belonging to aviator Leah Hing.
It's a bi-wing with nice taut lines. It's beautiful.
Jeff Yarn is a lifelong Portlander. Leah Hing was his mom's cousin.
We have a cockpit and it's open. You can see like a little control panel, which I think is really charming.
And this is Lynn Yarn, Jeff's daughter, a Portland artist and educator. On Memorial Day weekend in 2025, they both met me here to show me this plane and talk about their relative Leah.
Wow, can you imagine going up in the air, flying this? Just you in the sky? I can imagine Leah flying and hanging her elbow off the side while she's soaring. Like a little sports car.
Leah Hing was born in Portland on September 25th, 1907. When she was 5 years old, her family moved to the Ladd's Addition neighborhood in southeast Portland.
I think that house that she owned was probably one of the first houses able to be purchased by Chinese American families.
Ladd's Addition was one of the few places Chinese Portlanders and other Asian American residents were able to buy homes before World War II. Leah lived there for the rest of her life. Lynn said when she was a kid, Leah actually had 2 practically identical homes there right next door to each other, which amazed her. One was full of stuff. Leah called it the museum.
And then the other house she lived in with her partner, so I had imagined I don't know, that they had just been traveling all over the world collecting things. And that was my impression of Leah. And it was the first time I'd ever eaten macadamia nuts, because I think she gave some to me. And I thought that was just the coolest, most interesting possible scenario in my young mind.
Growing up in Portland, Leah, like Hazel, was involved in a ton of activities. For instance, she was the team manager of the Changhua Hoopers, a local basketball team for Chinese women. And when she was in high school, she started the Portland Chinese Girls Orchestra. She played the saxophone. Her childhood friend and longtime partner, Lillian Lang, was in the band too. After high school, they joined up with a vaudeville troupe and toured the U.S. and Canada.
She toured the country with a musical group. That's kind of adventuresome in its day.
At one point, Lynn came across a diary of Leah's from those years.
There was a lot of talking about noodles, and it was different places that they had been along their tour stop, what the noodles were like, what she ate, what happened that day. And I think just imagining what traveling through the country looked like back in that era, just traveling in general, but traveling as an Asian American woman must have been nuts.
So how did this traveling vaudevillian first get interested in flying? Well, take it from Leah herself.
Was there any special person that made you interested in flying?
Tex Rankin.
Tex Rankin.
He wanted, you can take up flying. I said, okay, I'll give it a try. So.
That's Leah Hing being interviewed by Patricia Keith in 1980 for an oral history for the Oregon Historical Society. This Tex Rankin was a pretty big deal. He was nationally known as an aerobatic pilot, barnstormer, and racer who also gave flight lessons. They met almost by accident.
My dad had a restaurant at that time, and he came up to eat.
Oh.
Leah was working at the Chinese Tea Garden on 3rd and Stark in 1932 when Tex Rankin came in and convinced her to take flying lessons with him. As I sat in the Pearson Air Museum's Tex Rankin Theater, appropriately enough, with Lynn and Jeff Yarn, they told me that Rankin trained a lot of female pilots back then.
An early Black woman pilot and an early Indigenous woman pilot. And so I kind of think about how cool it was that there were so many early Chinese American pilots, but also within Portland, just this little city, that we had so many groundbreaking pilot ladies.
Leah wanted to join up with the Chinese Flying Club of Portland, aka the Portland Group, where her acquaintance, Hazel Ying Lee, and another groundbreaking local pilot, Virginia Wong, were training to help the Chinese Air Force. But much to her dismay, her dad wouldn't let her. She did agree to take flying lessons with Tex Rankin, though, whose flight school at the time was on a tiny airfield in North Portland's historic Vanport.
Did your family approve of you?
Well, they didn't even know about it.
They didn't know about it?
Till afterwards, and I told them after I started taking
After
them.
you started?
Tex Rankin told the Oregonian that his student did everything right in her first lesson. Local and national press had become very interested in her training. In 1932, she told the Oregonian, quote, "I believe that women can learn to fly as easily as men. Eventually, there will be just as many women flying as men." We're not quite there yet. Today, around 10% of pilots worldwide are women. But hey, there's still time.
Do you remember the first time you soloed? Do you know what it was?
Scared to death.
Were you scared to death? Did you solo at Texas Field?
They didn't tell you. They just get out of the plane, all right, you take it.
He trained her in acrobatic flying, too. Leah took her final test at Pearson Airfield, where Rankin had previously taught lessons before moving his flying school to Portland. And in 1934, she earned her pilot's license. She purchased her first plane, the one in the museum, from the local Chinese Flying Club after she got her license. Over the years, Leah kept all her planes in a hangar at Pearson Field. She didn't pursue acrobatic flying or racing like her teacher, but was a skilled flyer nonetheless and flew passengers around the Northwest in those years. She also joined Amelia Earhart's organization for female pilots, the 99s.
I was Secretary Treasurer of the Northwest section for a long time.
Her original goal was to go to China to become an aviation instructor for women in the country's fight against the Japanese military. But in the end, she stayed in the U.S. through World War II. Like many private aviators at the time, she sold her plane to aid the war effort, but did ground training for the West Coast Air Patrol and repairs at the Portland Air Base.
She was also really good at fixing things. I think she did instrument repairs for planes.
In 1947, her pilot's license expired, and she never renewed it. But she stayed involved in the aviation world, working for decades at Portland's Aero Club.
But she was not allowed to join. So she was, I think, still enamored with the community of aviation and fellow pilots that she wanted to work there. I think she worked as an elevator person, a hat check person. And because she always carried a camera with her, I think she was a photographer there as well.
She worked there for decades until retirement at age 70. She lived into her 90s and stayed engaged with Portland's Chinese American communities throughout her life. She died in 2001 at the age of 94, surrounded by friends and family members in her Ladd's Addition home. Jeff and Lynn remember her less as a famous pilot and more as a full human being, their relative.
You know, whenever she went anywhere, she just had a great sense of humor, taking photographs, posing for photographs with her. She was always smiling and grinning away.
Lynn remembered something a family friend, Patsy Lee, told her about her grandmother's cousin.
She called her a real contemporary. She thought that in the ways that Leah was revolutionary are still so contemporary to today. It's not like she was a revolutionary for her time, like she was just a revolutionary spirit.
Lynn said her dedication to local Chinese American communities extended far past aviation.
I think something like aviation is really impressive and dreamy and well documented, but she did so many other things too, like helping people with their citizenship. It was mentioned to me by a couple of people, I believe, that Leah was a person who helped their parents pass the citizenship test and just to learn about how to get citizenship.
Lynn has thought a lot about Leah's legacy and what she would have wanted it to be. In 2023, Lynn completed the Leah Hing mural, a multimedia art piece hung in a conference room bearing Leah's name in the Portland building. She drew inspiration in part from a gathering of community members at Portland's Chinatown Museum who shared their visions for the future of Chinatown, but also from Leah herself.
I just love how happy she looks in pictures. Every person I talked to about Leah, and trying to find information would always mention Lil, her partner. They were like lifelong partners. There's pictures of them as children together. And I love that that's something that she built too. So not just breaking barriers, but like just creating happiness around her and like doing fun things like being in a girl band. I find that very inspiring.
Back in front of her plane in the Pearson Air Museum, Jeff and Lynn Yarn reflected on what it means to them to see it there.
It is a manifestation of Leah's life, or a portion of her life. And in talking about family history, you can bring people here and we can actually see this as opposed to, what's common these days is looking at a gravestone and having to imagine somebody's life. I mean, you look at this plane and you can imagine her soaring in the sky.
I think a lot of our images of Asian American women, even now, are like kind of more demure and like accommodating, and this is clearly not Leah. So I think it kind of brings up a reminder or like an essence of like an inner Leah in all of us, or especially in our family.
This podcast episode is a co-production with OPB's Oregon Experience. Watch their video about Hazel Ying Lee, made by OPB Arts and Culture video producer Emily Hamilton at opb.org. Thank you for listening to The Evergreen, a podcast from OPB. Join us next week for a deep dive into the city of Portland's relationship with sovereign tribal governments and indigenous city residents. We'll learn about the city's tribal relations program and how it went off course after a strong start several years ago. This episode was produced and engineered by me. Our technical director is Stephen Cray. The OPB podcast team also includes Mia Estrada, Julie Sabatier, Malia Fass, and Sage Van Wing. Tiffany Kamhai interviewed author Julie Leung, and I interviewed historian Jennifer Fang and the Yarn family. You also heard the voice of Karen Pan, who narrated the Oregon Experience video. You heard oral history recordings with Frances Tong and Elsie Chang, courtesy of Alan H. Rosenberg, the producer of A Brief Flight, as part of the Hazel Ying Lee and Frances M. Tong collection at the Museum of Chinese in America. You heard an oral history recording with Leah Hing, featuring interviewer Patricia Keith, courtesy of the Oregon Historical Society, which made the 1980 recording available via Creative Commons. You also heard newsreel footage from Reuters, British Movietone, Encyclopedia Britannica, the Associated Press, and the Army-Navy Screen Magazine. Music in this episode comes from Audio Network. And hey, if you have a question for us about my new passion, women's aviation history, or anything else, please reach out. Hit us up by email at theevergreen@opb.org. I'm Jen Chavez. Catch you later.